Welcome to another deep dive. We're going behind the scenes to explore how filmmakers use the secret weapon to create movie magic, and it's called mise-en-scene.
Yeah, it's French. It means like putting into the scene. And it's not as simple as just aiming a camera at actors. It's
Yeah,
way more than that. Like we're talking about everything the director puts in that frame, the
yeah.
sets, costumes, the lighting, even how the actors are positioned. Everything matters. And it's all carefully planned to get a specific effect.
So it's kind of like the director is a painter, right? And
Yeah.
mise-en-scene is their palette, and they use it to create like a masterpiece on the screen.
Exactly. And just like a painting can, like evoke a certain mood through color and brushstrokes, mise-en-scène can do the same for a film.
For this deep dive, we're using film art, an introduction. I mean, it's basically the film buff's Bible, right?
Yeah, for sure.
We've also got some really cool articles about this classic Hollywood drama, The Bad and the Beautiful.
Oh, yeah, and that film, The Bad and the Beautiful, that's a perfect example of mise-en-scène in action. It's like a love letter to that whole golden age of Hollywood. They use every trick to take us back to that world, all the glamour, but also how tough it was.
Can't wait to dig into that. But first, let's start with the basics. What's the most important thing when it comes to mise-en-scene?
The setting is huge, and this is where it gets interesting because the setting in film, it's not just a backdrop. It can actually become like a character itself, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It shapes how we see the story, how we understand the characters, everything.
I've never thought about it like that before. But yeah, when you think about a movie like Jaws, for example, I mean, that ocean, right? It's not just where the shark attacks are happening.
It's like this powerful force of nature that humans can't really control.
Exactly.
And just like Jaws, sometimes the setting is all about realism. Like, Roberto Rossellini's Germany Year Zero.
Yeah.
He filmed it in the ruins of Berlin right after World War II.
Mm-hmm.
Those buildings, the rubble, it shows the devastation of war,
Mm-hmm.
in a way that dialogue just never could.
Powerful imagery. So we have these settings that feel so real, but then some films create a totally different feeling.
Oh, for sure.
What about those?
Yeah, absolutely. Think about the Grand Budapest Hotel.
Love that movie.
The buildings are so stylized, those colors.
Yeah.
It's like you've entered this, like, fairy tale world.
Those two styles, I mean, they completely change how we see those films. But it's not all about these, like, huge sets, right? Small details can have just as big an impact. What about, like, props?
Prompts. Those small things, they can mean so much. Think about the movie Election and how they use that trash motif. It starts with Matthew Broderick's character, right? He's a teacher, and he's always cleaning the hallways, but then he throws away a really important ballot, that one piece of paper. It says so much about his character and this cynical view of ambition that the movie has.
No, that is some detail. Speaking of details, let's talk about costumes. It's like judging a book by its cover. I mean, we all do it to an extent. And costumes are like those eye-catching covers in film.
And costumes can, like, tell you a lot about the story, just like a book cover can. Think about Annie's University of Arizona sweater in Speed. That one little detail ends up being how they crack the case. Perfect example of how a costume can actually drive the plot.
And it's not just about moving the plot forward. Costumes can tell us so much about a character's personality, even what they want deep down.
Absolutely. Think about Guido in Fellini's 8-1 Air 2 and his sunglasses. They're not just a fashion statement. Those things are like a shield. He's hiding from his life, trying to seem cool and detached, but really, he's a mess inside.
Such a good example. And like we talked about with setting and props, color is a huge deal in costumes too.
Huge. Filmmakers will use color to, like, make a big contrast or maybe blend characters with the world around them. Like in The Night of the Shooting Stars, remember that? Those dark costumes against the bright wheat fields creates a powerful image. Like their darkness is all spreading into the landscape.
And then there's Fellini's Casanova, right? Where the costumes, all those reds almost blend into the sets, and you just get this overwhelming feeling of like decadence and emotion.
Speaking of heightened emotion, makeup. It's amazing how it's gone from just being practical in the early days of film to being a true art form.
For sure. I mean, think about it. You have the realism of The Passion of Joan of Arc, where there's no makeup, and then you have the elaborate makeup used to make Nikolai Trikosov into Ivan the Terrible. It's amazing. And what about all the advances in makeup? Like in the Grand Budapest Hotel, Tilda Swinton playing that old lady.
11 pieces of makeup.
Seriously. I mean, that's incredible.
It's really something.
But it doesn't always have to be over the top, right? The small details can make all the difference.
It's true. With technology, makeup has so many possibilities now, but it all comes down to making the face more expressive. Like, have you noticed how much eyebrows can change a person's face? Arched eyebrows can show surprise. Sloping ones can mean sadness. It's really fascinating.
You're right. Eyebrows are super underrated.
Yeah, and with CGI now, they can change even more. Like in Harry Potter, how they got rid of Voldemort's nose, or how they made Brad Pitt look younger in that movie, Benjamin Button. The possibilities are, like, endless.
It's mind-blowing. It all goes back to this idea of like mise-en-scene being like a visual language, right? Every detail, the set, an eyebrow, all of it tells the story.
Exactly. And if we want to understand the story, we have to notice those details.
I like that. Now, how about we shine a light literally on another part of mise-en-scene lighting? We don't always think about it, but it's so important.
It is. It's like the filmmaker's paintbrush.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever noticed how some movies look really real and others feel kind of dreamy and romantic?
Totally.
A lot of that is the lighting. It changes how we see everything in the scene. It can guide our attention, show us textures, make us feel things.
It's like in a painting, right? The way the light hits, it can make something look closer or farther, you know,
Right.
or highlight certain parts or even like suggest movement.
Exactly. Think about hard lighting versus soft lighting. Hard lighting, like being out in the sun at noon, creates those really sharp shadows and, it just has a more dramatic feel.
Like in Satyajit Ray's Aparhito, he uses that hard light to emphasize everyday life in India. You see the textures of the landscape, the lines on the characters' faces. There's just this honesty to it, like he's saying, this is life, the good and the bad.
You got it. It's like the harshness of reality as a character itself.
Yeah.
Then you have soft light, like on a cloudy day, and everything's kind of hazy and the mood is softer.
So if hard light is like a documentary, then soft light is more like a romance, adding a bit of mystery.
You got it. And then we have the direction of the light. It's super important.
Okay, tell me more about that. Like, what are the different directions and what do they do?
Well, you have frontal lighting, which is like right in front of the subject. It minimizes shadows and makes everything look even and flat. Godard does this a lot in La Chinoise to get that pop art look.
It's like those old photos where everything's lit perfectly, no shadows anywhere, right?
Yeah. Now, if you want to make a face look more dramatic, you use side lighting, which highlights all the curves and features.
Oh, like Rembrandt lighting,
Yeah.
you know, in all those classic films. Half the face is in light, half in shadow.
Exactly. And speaking of shadows, there's backlighting, which comes from behind. It can do all sorts of things depending on where it is and how strong it is.
Like what?
Well, a soft backlight, it can make this halo, separating someone from everything behind them and giving them this, like, glow. Like how movie stars always have that angelic look.
Yeah.
That's backlighting.
Makes sense. Like they have this otherworldly glow. No wonder they seem glamorous.
Right. And then if you want to go for drama, you use a stronger backlight. All you see is the outline of the person, and it adds this element of, like, mystery or even, like, danger, like those old film noir movies with the detectives in the shadows.
I love those scenes. It's like you're thrown into this world of secrets.
Exactly. And we've just scratched the surface here. We haven't even touched on underlighting or top lighting or all the cool things you can do with gels and filters.
That's so much to unpack. Okay, before we get to those lighting techniques, let's take a second to think about how much we've already learned about mise-en-scene. We've gone from, like, giant sets to tiny eyebrow movements.
And we're just getting started.
Can't wait to see what other cinematic secrets we uncover. So we've been talking about all these visual elements, you know, like sets, props, costumes, lighting. It's crazy how much work goes into it all. But in the end, movies need actors.
Oh, totally. It wouldn't be a movie without them.
Exactly. Actors are the ones who take all that stuff, the sets, the costumes, and make it real, you know? They bring the emotion to those spaces.
For sure.
So let's talk about, like, the heart of mise-en-scene acting. How does a director stage those amazing performances?
Well, a lot of people think that acting is all about being, like, believable or realistic, right? But there's so many different acting styles, and what works for one movie might not work for another.
Yeah, if you're in, like, a gritty crime drama, you can't act like you're in a Shakespeare play.
Right. And that's where the director's vision is so important.
Right.
They got to choose actors whose style fits the movie they're making.
So it's like the director's putting together a band, and each actor has to play their instrument in a way that makes the whole thing sound good.
Love that. And, speaking of different instruments in acting, there's typecasting. I'm sure you've noticed that, especially in Hollywood movies.
Totally. You have your action stars, your romantic leads, the funny best friend. Those actors often get stuck playing the same kinds of roles over and over.
Yeah. And after a while, you can't really imagine them playing anything else.
True. Although sometimes it's nice to see an actor you love just like do their thing, you know?
Definitely. Then you have some directors who like to do the opposite. They cast against type.
Right. When a comedic actor does a serious role and just blows everyone away.
Yeah, it shows their range. And that brings us to another really cool thing about acting. How natural it feels. Some directors want things super realistic, like a documentary almost. Others go for a more, I don't know, stylized or theatrical style.
Manchester by the Sea. That movie wrecked me. Those performances were so real and raw. How do they do that? What's the secret to that kind of naturalism?
It often involves a lot of improv, letting the actors use their own experiences to become the characters, and the director needs to give them space to let those real moments happen.
Wow, it's like a dance between the actors and the director.
It is. And then there are movies that go in the opposite direction.
Yeah.
With a more dramatic style of acting in those classic Hollywood melodramas.
Yes, with the big dramatic scenes and the tears and the over-the-top emotions. They're fun to watch.
Totally. And that style usually reflects the time period when the film was made.
Oh, for sure. Can you imagine someone from, like, a silent film acting in an action movie today? It wouldn't work.
Not at all. How we express ourselves on screen has changed a lot over time. Speaking of changing, we can't forget about motion capture and performance capture technology. They're changing everything.
Right. Those are game changers. It's amazing how actors can literally become, like, fully digital characters. Gollum in Lord of the Rings, Caesar in those new Planet of the Apes movies.
It's like the line between acting and animation doesn't exist anymore.
It's crazy, and it's not just about how they move, right?
Yeah.
That technology can capture every little detail of their face, too.
Exactly. Take Andy Serkis. He's like the master of motion capture. Gollum, King Kong, Caesar. He does it all. And he brings such depth to those roles, even though you never actually see his face.
It's unbelievable. It's like he becomes those characters just through his body and his voice. It's pure magic.
It really is.
Yeah.
Makes you wonder what acting will be like in the future as the technology keeps getting better.
I'm excited to see where it goes. But before we get too far into the future, let's go back to The Bad and the Beautiful. That movie's like the ultimate love letter to classic Hollywood, right?
100%. It shows how a director, in this case, Vincente Minnelli, can use mise-en-scene to make us feel like we're in a specific time and place.
So let's say we're about to watch The Bad and Beautiful for the first time. What should we be looking for, like in terms of the mise-en-scene?
Well, first, pay attention to how it looks. It's in black and white, which instantly makes you think of classic Hollywood.
It's true. There's just something about black and white film.
Yeah, and Minnelli came from the theater world, and
Yeah.
he uses the camera in this very deliberate way, like you'd see on stage. Long takes, moving the camera smoothly, composing each shot perfectly. It's really cool.
So he's bringing that stage experience to the big screen.
Exactly. And then you have the actors.
Oh, yeah, amazing cast. Kirk Douglas plays this super ambitious, driven producer, Jonathan Shields.
He's like the ultimate Hollywood big shot, right?
Yeah.
Powerful, charming, a little scary.
And Lana Turner. She plays Georgia Lorison, the classic femme fatale. Beautiful, talented, but with her own demons.
And you can't forget Walter Pidgeon as Harry Pebble, the wise studio executive who's seen it all.
Talk about a masterclass in acting. It's not just the individual performances, though, right? It's how they work together with everything else, with the mise-en-scene.
Absolutely. And that's what makes Minnelli such a great director. He knew how to use the setting, lighting, camera movement, everything to make those performances even better, to create a world that felt real and heightened at the same time.
Okay, now I really want to hear more. But before we dive into The Bad and the Beautiful, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll explore how Minnelli used mise-en-scene to make this film so unforgettable. Okay, so we're back, and we're still buzzing about The Bad and the Beautiful and how Minnelli uses mise-en-scene to really pull us into that world.
You know, one of the things that makes this film so interesting is that it's like aware of itself as a movie about making movies.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't just tell us a story about Hollywood. It uses all the tricks to show us how they do it.
So meta. We're getting a peek behind the curtain. Where do you see that self-awareness most in this film?
Well, remember those amazing black and white images we talked about?
Mm.
This film was made when color was becoming a thing, but Minnelli chose to shoot in black and white, and not just any black and white. It's so rich, you know.
So he's making a choice. Like, he wants us to think of those classic films, even though color was becoming, like, the new standard.
Exactly. And it's not just that he used black and white, it's how he uses it. Light and shadow. He plays with them in this really expressive way.
Ooh, give me an example. I love when lighting just makes a scene.
Think about the scene where Jonathan Shields, the producer, is trying to get James Lee Bartlow, the writer, to work on his film. They're in Bartlow's apartment. And it is a mess. Papers all over, empty bottles. It's chaotic.
And Shields, who's usually so in control, he seems really out of place in all that mess.
Totally. Like, the apartment shows us what's going on inside Bartlow's head, you know. And Shields, even though he's such a smooth talker, he doesn't know what to do. And the lighting adds to that feeling. It's really shadowy. You can't see everything clearly. Their faces, parts of the room. It's hidden.
So it feels really intimate, but also kind of, I don't know, unsettling, like we're missing something.
Exactly. You got it. And then how the camera moves in that scene, it's smooth. Like we're spying on them, listening in on this really private conversation. Minnelli's not just showing us. He's making us feel it.
Yeah.
You know, like we're right there with them.
That's amazing. He's using everything, right? The set, the lighting, the camera. It's like its own little story within the story.
That's exactly what makes The Bad and the Beautiful so good. Minnelli gets that every little detail matters.
It's like he composed a symphony, but with visuals instead of music. So cool. We've talked about so much, from sets and props to the way they use lighting and cameras. What's the one thing you hope really sticks with our listeners after this?
I hope this deep dive makes them watch movies in a whole new way. To really see those details we've been talking about, the sets, costumes, lighting, how the actors are placed, all of it.
Because once you start noticing those things, you realize it's not by accident, right? They're choices that the filmmakers made, and they all add to the movie, to what it means.
Yes. When you start noticing, watching films becomes even better. You see the art, the purpose behind everything.
It's like breaking a code, you know? You get to see how it all works.
Totally. And The Bad and the Beautiful, it reminds us that making movies is a team effort. It's not just one person.
Yeah.
It's the director, the writer, the actors, the people who do the costumes, sets, lights. They all have to work together.
And that's what makes movies so magical, right? Being taken to another world, feeling all these emotions, seeing things in a new way.
Exactly. And the more we understand how films work, the more we connect with them.
Well said. So until next time, keep watching movies and keep an eye out for those little touches of movie magic.
Remember, every time you watch a film, you're not just watching a story. You're seeing the art of filmmaking in action.
Happy watching.